The blood on her hands had long since dried, but Teresa Brennan still scrubbed them raw every morning, as if enough lye soap and creek water could wash away 3 years of surviving hell. She stood at the edge of Loveland, Colorado in the spring of 1878, a woman of 23 who looked older in the eyes and younger in the fear that seized her whenever a man's voice rose above conversational tone. The stagecoach had deposited her here with nothing but a carpet bag containing 2 dresses, a Bible she couldn't bring herself to open, and $12 she'd stolen from the man who'd called himself her husband before she'd left him bleeding in a Kansas farmhouse. She told herself it wasn't murder if you were already dead inside. The morning sun painted the Rocky Mountains gold and purple in the distance, and Teresa thought maybe Colorado would be far enough. Far enough from Kansas, far enough from memories of fists and accusations, far enough from the woman she'd been before kindness became a foreign language she no longer spoke. She'd forgotten what it felt like, that particular warmth of someone caring whether you lived or died, whether you'd eaten, whether the bruises hurt. In the 3 years since her father had sold her to Clayton Marsh to settle a gambling debt, Teresa had learned that survival meant expecting nothing and trusting no one. Loveland sprawled before her, a town that had grown up around the Colorado Central Railroad, its main street lined with false-fronted buildings that promised civilization in the wilderness. She needed work, and she needed it before her $12 became 11, then 10, then nothing. The general store had a help wanted sign in the window, and Teresa smoothed her brown traveling dress, tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and walked through the door with her eyes down and her expectations lower. The proprietor, a stout woman named Mrs. Callahan, looked her over with the sharp eye of someone who'd seen hard luck before and knew it when it walked through her door. "You running from something or towards something? Does it matter?" Teresa's voice came out rougher than she intended. "Not particularly. Can you read, write, and cipher?" "Yes, madam." "Can you work from dawn till dusk without complaining?" "I can work longer if needed." Mrs. Callahan nodded slowly. "Room and board plus $3 a week. You steal from me, I'll have the marshal on you. You cause trouble, you're out, we clear. Crystal. There's a room above the store. It isn't much, but it's yours. You start now." Teresa spent that first day learning where everything was shelved, how Mrs. Callahan liked the accounts kept, and which customers had credit and which needed to pay in coin. She kept her head down and her responses brief, and when men came into the store, she positioned herself so the counter was always between them and her. Mrs. Callahan noticed but said nothing, and Teresa was grateful for that too. She might have continued that way indefinitely, a ghost in calico moving through the motions of living, if Ethan Sharpe hadn't walked into the store 3 days later needing flour, coffee, and sugar. He was tall, and that made Teresa's shoulders tighten instinctively, but he removed his hat when he entered, and his voice when he spoke was low and even. "Morning, Mrs. Callahan. Miss." He nodded to Teresa, and she managed a tight nod back, her hand already reaching for the flour sack before he'd finished his list. "Ethan, this is Teresa. She's helping me in the store now, Mrs." Callahan's voice held a note Teresa would later recognize as protective, a warning wrapped in an introduction. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Teresa." He didn't offer his hand, perhaps reading something in her posture that suggested touching her would be unwelcome. Instead, he kept a respectful distance while she measured out his supplies. "That'll be $1.20, Teresa said, her eyes on the counter. Ethan counted out the coins and added an extra dime. "For the service. The prices are the prices." Teresa pushed the dime back toward him. "Then consider it a welcome to Loveland gift. I don't take charity. Something shifted in his expression, not offense but understanding. Wasn't offering charity, was offering neighborliness. But I respect your position. He pocketed the dime, gathered his supplies, and tipped his hat again. Mrs. Callahan, Miss Teresa, I hope you have a fine day. After he left, Mrs. Callahan said, That's Ethan Sharpe. Has a ranch about 5 miles north of town. His father started it, but Ethan runs it now since his parents passed on. He's good people. Teresa said nothing. In her experience, everyone was good people until they weren't. But Ethan Sharpe came back 2 days later, needing nails this time, and then 3 days after that for lamp oil, and Teresa began to notice a pattern. He always came in the early morning when the store was quiet. He always kept his voice low and his movements slow, as if he were approaching a skittish horse. He never tried to make conversation beyond what was necessary for the transaction, but he always thanked her, always tipped his hat, always wished her a good day. On his 4th visit, he set a jar of honey on the counter alongside his list. Mrs. Callahan mentioned you liked honey in your tea. My bees produced extra this spring. Teresa stared at the jar as if it were a snake. Why would you bring me honey? Because I had extra and you like it. He said it simply, as if kindness required no more explanation than that. I don't need your gifts. Wasn't a gift, was just neighborly. He paused, then added carefully, But if it troubles you, I won't do it again. Teresa's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped his purchases. It troubles me when people expect something in return. Then it's fortunate I don't expect anything. His voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath, the firmness of a man who meant what he said. Miss Teresa, I don't know what brought you to Loveland, and I don't need to know. But you're here now, and in this town, we look after our own. No strings, no expectations, just people being decent to each other because that's what people ought to be. After he left, Teresa opened the jar of honey and stared at the golden sweetness inside. That night, she put a spoonful in her tea and cried for the first time since Kansas, because she'd forgotten what kindness tasted like, and it was almost too much to bear. Ethan came back the next week with the excuse of needing thread, which Mrs. Callahan later told Teresa was ridiculous, because Ethan Sharpe couldn't sew a button to save his life and everyone knew it. He also brought eggs from his henhouse, still warm, and said Mrs. Callahan had mentioned the store's supplier was running low. You don't have to keep doing this, Teresa said, but her voice had lost some of its sharp edges. I know I don't have to, I want to. He met her eyes directly, and Teresa saw something there that made her chest ache. Sincerity. Actual, honest-to-God sincerity without ulterior motive lurking behind it. Has anyone told you there's a dance next Saturday? Town social. Pretty much everyone goes. I don't dance. Neither do I, mostly. I step on toes and apologize a lot, but the food's good and it's a chance to meet folks. I don't need to meet folks. All right. He didn't push, didn't cajole, didn't tell her she was being unreasonable. He just accepted her answer and changed the subject. How are you settling in? Room comfortable enough? The question was so unexpected that Teresa answered honestly. It's the nicest place I've lived in years. Something flickered across Ethan's face, an emotion she couldn't quite name, but it looked like anger on someone else's behalf. I'm glad you're comfortable. Everyone deserves a safe place to lay their head. After he left that day, Mrs. Callahan said, He's sweet on you. He doesn't know me. Maybe he wants to. Then he's a fool. Mrs. Callahan laughed, not unkindly. Most men are fools when it comes to women, but Ethan's a good fool if you're going to have one sniffing around. His father was a hard man, from what I hear, but Ethan broke that mold. Never raised his voice to anyone. Never raised his hand either, even when he'd have been justified. Teresa's throat tightened. Everyone raises their hand eventually. No, honey, some people do. But not everyone, and not Ethan Sharpe. Mrs. Callahan's voice was firm. I've known that boy since he was 16 years old and first came to town with his father. Seen him deal with drunks who got rowdy, seen him handle disputes with other ranchers, seen him lose cattle to disease and money to bad winters. Never once seen him lash out in anger. He just isn't built that way. Teresa wanted to believe her. God, how she wanted to believe that men like that existed. But 3 years of hard evidence suggested otherwise. Still, Ethan kept coming. Once a week, sometimes twice, always with some small excuse and some small offering. A handful of wildflowers that he claimed were growing all over his property and going to waste anyway. A book he'd finished reading and thought she might enjoy. A bottle of tonic when she'd had a cold, which Mrs. Callahan must have mentioned to him. Why are you doing this? Teresa finally asked him one morning in early June, when he'd brought her a small carved wooden bird that he said he'd whittled during long evenings. Ethan set down the bird gently on the counter between them. Because you look like you've forgotten what kindness feels like, and I figure it's my job to remind you. That's not your job. Maybe not, but I'm making it my job anyway. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger than his 26 years. You don't have to accept it, Teresa. You don't have to trust me or like me or even tolerate me beyond what's required for me to shop here. But I'm going to keep being kind to you, every day, without fail, because someone needs to show you that not everyone in this world is out to hurt you. Teresa's eyes burned. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you flinch when men raise their voices. I know you position yourself so there's always furniture between you and male customers. I know you look at kindness like it's a trap waiting to spring. And I know that someone somewhere taught you to be that way, and they were wrong to do it. His voice remained gentle, but there was that steel again underneath. You deserved better then, and you deserve better now. What if I don't want your kindness? Then I'll still give it. You can reject it, ignore it, or throw it back in my face, but I'll keep offering it anyway because that's what decent people do. He picked up his package of supplies. I'll see you next week, Teresa. I hope you have a beautiful day. After he left, Teresa picked up the carved bird. It was a meadowlark, detailed and delicate, and she wondered how many hours Ethan had spent creating something to give to a woman who kept pushing him away. She put it in her room on the small table by her window, where she could see it when she woke up. The next week, Ethan asked if she'd like to take a walk after the store closed. Why would I do that? Because it's a nice evening and walking is pleasant, and I thought you might enjoy seeing some of the town beyond Main Street. He held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. We'd stay on public streets, plenty of people around. You could leave whenever you wanted. I just thought you might like some company. Teresa should have said no. Every instinct she'd honed over 3 brutal years screamed at her to say no, to keep her distance, to protect herself. But there was something in Ethan's patient, steady presence that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could risk this small thing. One walk. And if I say I want to go back, we go back immediately. Deal. They walked through Loveland as the sun painted the sky orange and gold, and Ethan pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the town. He'd been born in Missouri, but came to Colorado with his parents when he was 10, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. His father had built the ranch from nothing, acre by acre, cow by cow, and when both parents had died of influenza 2 years ago, Ethan had inherited all of it along with the debt. Are you clear of the debt now? Teresa asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. But Ethan didn't seem to mind. Nearly. Another good year and I'll own the land free and clear. It's been hard work, but honest work, and I like that. Don't you get lonely out there, sometimes? I've got 2 ranch hands who help during busy seasons, but mostly it's just me and the cattle and the horses. Gets quiet." He glanced at her sideways. "What about you? Do you get lonely?" Teresa considered lying, but something about the evening light and Ethan's genuine question made her honest. "I've been lonely for so long I'm not sure I'd recognize any other way of being. That's about the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's just the truth." They walked in silence for a while, and then Ethan said, "Would you like to see the ranch sometime? Not alone," he added quickly. "Mrs. Callahan could come, or we could go on a Sunday when the ranch hands are there. I just thought you might enjoy getting out of town for an afternoon. The mountains are beautiful from my northern pasture. I'll think about it. That's all I ask." True to his word, Ethan didn't push. But he kept coming to the store, kept bringing small offerings, kept treating Teresa with a careful gentleness that made her chest ache and her defenses slowly, incrementally crumble. He learned that she liked peppermint sticks and started bringing them. He noticed when she admired a bolt of blue fabric and bought her enough for a new dress. When she protested, he said it was a thank you for always having his supplies ready when he came in, and Mrs. Callahan backed him up, saying it was only fair compensation for good service. In July, Teresa finally agreed to visit the ranch. Mrs. Callahan came along, chattering happily in the wagon Ethan drove, and Teresa sat stiff and nervous until they crested a hill, and she saw the spread laid out below them. The ranch house was modest but well-maintained, with a wide porch and windows that caught the light. Outbuildings dotted the property, and cattle grazed in pastures that stretched toward the mountains. It was beautiful in a raw, honest way that made Teresa's throat tight. "Welcome to the Sharpe Ranch," Ethan said, and there was pride in his voice, the earned pride of a man who'd worked for everything he had. He showed them around, introduced them to his 2 ranch hands, Diego and Sam, who were polite and respectful, and made no comment about Ethan bringing lady visitors. Mrs. Callahan made herself comfortable on the porch with lemonade while Ethan walked Teresa to the northern pasture he'd mentioned. "It's even prettier than you said," Teresa admitted, looking at the mountains rising purple and white in the distance. "I come up here when I need to think. Something about the space and the quiet helps clear my head." Ethan leaned against the fence rail, his posture relaxed. "Can I ask you something personal?" Teresa tensed. "You can ask, I might not answer." "Fair enough." He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "The man you ran from, is he likely to come looking for you?" Teresa's heart stuttered. "I don't know, maybe, probably." She'd been trying not to think about it, but the fear lived in her constantly, a low-grade terror that one day Clayton would appear and drag her back to Kansas and everything would have been for nothing. "If he does, he'll have to go through me first. You don't have to fight my battles." "No, but I want to. Teresa, I know we've only known each other a few months, but I care about you. I care about your safety and your happiness, and I'll be damned if I let anyone hurt you again." His voice was fierce, protective, and Teresa felt something crack in her chest, some wall she'd built to keep people out. "Why?" The question came out almost a whisper. "Why do you care so much about someone you barely know?" Ethan turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious. "Because from the moment I saw you, I recognized something in you. Pain, yes, but also strength. Incredible strength. You survived something terrible and you're still here, still standing, still trying. That takes courage I'm not sure I possess. And because every time you smile, which isn't often enough, it's like the sun coming out. I want to see that smile every day. I want to be the reason for it if you'll let me. I don't know how to let anyone care about me anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. Slowly. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 people learning to trust each other." He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. "What do you say? Will you give me a chance? Teresa looked at his hand for a long moment. It was calloused from ranch work, strong but gentle, and it wasn't reaching to grab her but waiting for her to make the choice. She thought about the last 3 months, about every small kindness, every patient gesture, every moment Ethan had shown her that not all men were monsters. She thought about the carved bird on her windowsill and the honey in her tea and the way he always wished her a beautiful day. Slowly, carefully, she placed her hand in his. Ethan's fingers closed around hers, warm and secure, and he smiled that sunlight smile. Thank you for trusting me. I'm still scared. I know. That's okay. Scared is normal after what you've been through. But I promise you, Teresa, I will remind you every day what kindness feels like. I'll remind you that you're worth caring about, that you deserve gentleness and respect and love. I'll remind you until you believe it yourself. Teresa felt tears slip down her cheeks, the second time she'd cried in Colorado, but these tears were different. These tears were release, the beginning of letting go of some of the weight she'd carried for so long. What if I'm too broken? You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. And healing takes time, but I've got nothing but time to give you. They stood there in the northern pasture with the mountains watching and the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders, and Teresa felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but hope nonetheless. After that day, things shifted between them. Teresa started looking forward to Ethan's visits to the store, instead of dreading them. She started noticing little things about him, like the way he always smelled of leather and sunshine, or how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, or the gentle competence of his hands as he handled whatever he was purchasing. She started, slowly and against all her better judgment, to fall for him. Ethan continued his campaign of daily kindness with the dedication of a man on a mission. He brought her wildflowers and told her which ones were edible. He brought her a book of poetry and read her his favorite verses. He brought her news from around the territory and asked her opinion on matters, treating her thoughts as valuable. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never complained when she pulled back out of fear, never made her feel guilty for her hesitation. In August, they started taking regular walks after the store closed. Teresa found herself talking to Ethan about things she'd never told anyone. About her childhood in Missouri, back when her mother was still alive and her father was still sober. About the books she loved to read, and the dreams she'd once had of becoming a teacher. About the 3 years with Clayton, though she couldn't bring herself to share details, only the broad strokes of isolation and fear. Ethan listened to all of it without judgment, without trying to fix her, without telling her she should feel differently than she did. He just listened, and then he told her his own stories. About his father's temper, and how Ethan had promised himself he'd never become that kind of man. About his mother's gentle wisdom, and how he tried to honor her memory by treating people with kindness. About his own loneliness and his hope that someday he'd find someone to share the ranch and his life with. Is that why you're spending so much time with me? Teresa asked. Because you want a wife. I'm spending time with you because I enjoy your company. If that leads to more someday, I'd be honored. But if it doesn't, I still want you in my life as a friend. Whatever you can give me, Teresa, it's enough. You're enough. It was the right thing to say, and Teresa felt herself falling a little bit more. In September, the first cool winds came down from the mountains, and Ethan brought Teresa a shawl his mother had knitted years ago. I've been saving it, thinking I'd give it to someone special. I'd like you to have it. Teresa wrapped herself in the soft wool and felt surrounded by warmth and care. This is too precious to give away. It's precious, which is why I'm giving it to someone precious. Ethan's voice was soft. Teresa, I need you to know something. I'm falling in love with you. I might already be completely in love with you. And I know that might scare you, and if it does, we don't have to talk about it again. But I wanted you to know, because I don't believe in hiding truth. Teresa's heart hammered against her ribs. Ethan, you don't have to say anything back. You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know how I feel so there's honesty between us. I'm afraid, Teresa whispered. I'm afraid of what loving someone means. Last time I trusted a man, I ended up. She couldn't finish the sentence. I know. And I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm asking you to trust what you've seen over these past months. Trust the evidence of how I've treated you. Trust that I mean what I say and say what I mean. He took her hands carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. I love you, Teresa Brennan. I love your strength and your caution and your slow, blooming smile. I love the way you think about things before you speak, and the way you're kind to Mrs. Callahan even when you're having a hard day. I love that you're still standing after everything that tried to knock you down. And I want to spend the rest of my life reminding you every single day what kindness feels like, what love feels like, until you believe in your bones that you deserve it. Teresa looked at their joined hands, at the way Ethan's thumbs were stroking gentle circles on her wrists, and she thought about the difference between Clayton's grip, which had been about control, and Ethan's touch, which was about connection. I think I might be falling in love with you too. But I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, really. I've never been in love before, so we'll figure it out together one day at a time, he smiled. Can I court you properly? Come calling, take you to socials, introduce you around as my girl. Your girl, Teresa repeated, testing the words. They felt strange in her mouth, strange but not bad. Yes, you can court me. Ethan's face lit up like Christmas morning. You've just made me the happiest man in Colorado. From then on, Ethan came calling every Sunday after church, dressed in his best clothes, and sat with Teresa in Mrs. Callahan's parlor. They talked about everything and nothing, about books and ranching and the future of the territory. Ethan told her about his plans to expand the ranch, to build up the herd, maybe to start breeding horses. Teresa told him about her dream of teaching and how she'd put it aside but sometimes wondered if it was too late to reclaim it. It's never too late, Ethan said firmly. Loveland could use a good teacher. We've got more families moving in every year, and the current schoolhouse is barely managing. If you wanted to teach, I'd support you in that. You wouldn't want a wife who worked. I want a wife who's happy and fulfilled. If teaching makes you happy, then yes, I want a wife who teaches. He grinned. Though I admit I'd also like a wife who comes home to me at the end of the day and lets me make her dinner and tell her about the stubborn cow who refuses to stay in her pasture. Teresa laughed, a real laugh, and Ethan's expression softened. There it is. That smile. That's what I live for. In October, Ethan took Teresa to the Harvest Social. She was nervous about being in a crowd, about being watched and judged, but Ethan stayed close without hovering, introducing her to people and deflecting the overly curious with polite firmness. When the dancing started, he held out his hand. I thought you didn't dance. I don't, well, but I'll dance badly with you if you'll have me. They danced badly together, laughing when Ethan stepped on her toes and when Teresa went the wrong direction, and it was the most fun Teresa had had in as long as she could remember. Being held in Ethan's arms, safe and respected and cared for, felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. Later, when Ethan was walking her back to the store, he said, I need to ask you something serious. Teresa's stomach clenched with old fear. What? That man, your husband. Were you legally married? The question surprised her. I don't know. There was a ceremony, but I'm not sure if it was official. My father arranged it, and I was 17 and didn't have a say. If he does come looking for you, we need to know whether there are legal ties. I can have a lawyer friend in Denver look into it discreetly if you give me the details. Ethan's voice was careful. I'm not trying to push you toward anything, but if we're going to build a future together, I want to make sure you're free to do so. What if I'm not? What if I'm still legally his wife? Then we figure out how to fix that. Annulment maybe, or divorce if necessary. There are ways, Teresa. You're not trapped, I promise. Teresa felt another piece of her prison fall away. I'll tell you everything I remember. Names, dates, places. Will your lawyer friend be discreet? I trust him with my life. He'll be discreet. Ethan paused at the door to the store. Can I kiss you good night? It was the first time he'd asked, and Teresa appreciated that he had asked rather than assuming. Yes. Ethan cupped her face gently in his hands and pressed his lips to hers, soft and sweet and achingly tender. It was nothing like the brutal kisses Clayton had forced on her. This was reverence and affection and the promise of more, and when Ethan pulled back, Teresa found herself leaning after him, wanting more of this feeling, this rightness. Good night, Teresa. Thank you for a perfect evening. Thank you for reminding me what a perfect evening feels like. The lawyer's inquiry came back in November. The marriage had been legal, technically, performed by a justice of the peace in Kansas, but there were grounds for annulment based on Teresa's age at the time and the coercive circumstances. Moreover, Clayton Marsh had been wanted for questioning in connection with several crimes, and there were rumors he'd died over the summer, killed in a bar fight in Abilene. You're free, Ethan told her, holding the letter from his lawyer friend. He's dead, and even if he weren't, you'd have grounds to end the marriage. Teresa sat down hard, her legs suddenly unable to support her. He's really dead, according to the reports, yes. You're safe, Teresa. He can never hurt you again. She started crying then, great heaving sobs that she couldn't control, and Ethan gathered her into his arms and held her while she shook apart. It's okay. Let it out. You're safe now. I've got you. When the storm passed, Teresa felt hollowed out but also lighter, as if she'd been carrying a boulder and had finally set it down. I'm free. You're free. I can actually build a life here. I don't have to keep looking over my shoulder. You can build any life you want. And if you want me in it, I'm yours. Ethan stroked her hair gently. What do you want, Teresa? Not what you think you should want or what anyone else wants for you. What do you want? Teresa thought about it, really thought about it, maybe for the first time in her life. I want to teach. I want to help children learn and give them opportunities I didn't have. And I want you. I want this thing we're building together. I want to wake up every morning knowing I'm safe and cared for. I want to stop being afraid. Then that's what we'll make happen. All of it. Ethan kissed her forehead. Will you marry me, Teresa? Will you be my wife and my partner and the person I get to remind every day how extraordinary you are? Yes. The word came easily, more easily than Teresa would have thought possible months ago. Yes, I'll marry you. Ethan whooped and spun her around, laughing like a boy, and Teresa laughed with him, feeling joy bubble up inside her like a spring breaking through rock. They were married in December, a small ceremony at the church in Loveland with Mrs. Callahan and the ranch hands as witnesses. Teresa wore a dress of blue fabric, the same bolt Ethan had bought her months ago, which Mrs. Callahan had helped her sew into something beautiful. Ethan wore his best suit and looked at Teresa like she hung the moon and stars. I promise to love you and honor you and remind you every single day what kindness feels like, Ethan said when it was time for vows. I promise to be patient when you're scared and steady when you need something to hold on to. I promise to support your dreams and celebrate your victories and hold you through your sorrows. I promise to be the man you deserve every day for the rest of our lives. Teresa's hands shook as she said her own vows. "I promise to trust you, even when trust is hard. I promise to believe in the kindness you show me and to try to be kind in return. I promise to build a life with you, a good life, filled with love and laughter and all the things I forgot were possible. I promise to be your partner in everything, for as long as we both live." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Ethan he could kiss his bride, Ethan did so with such tenderness that Teresa felt tears slip down her cheeks. These were good tears, happy tears, and she was learning that not all tears meant pain. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the house that was now Teresa's home. Ethan had prepared the bedroom with care, fresh linens and wildflowers and candles for soft light. He was patient and gentle, letting Teresa set the pace, and when she finally gave herself to him fully, it was nothing like the brutality she'd known before. This was love, real love, two people joining together in trust and affection, and Teresa understood for the first time what intimacy was supposed to be. Afterward, lying in Ethan's arms with her head on his chest, Teresa said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me. Every day without fail. For showing me what kindness feels like, what love feels like. For being patient with me when I didn't know how to accept it. For not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "I could never give up on you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Teresa Sharpe." "Teresa Sharpe," she repeated, trying out her new name. "I like how that sounds. So do I." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Teresa had expected difficulty, had expected her fear to resurface and cause problems, but Ethan's steady presence and unwavering kindness made everything easier than she'd imagined. He woke her every morning with coffee and a kiss. He listened to her talk about her plans for teaching. He helped her prepare lessons when the town council agreed to hire her for the schoolhouse starting in January. He reminded her, every single day without fail, that she was loved and valued and safe. In turn, Teresa learned to be a wife to a good man, which was entirely different from what she'd experienced before. She learned that partnership meant equal say in decisions. She learned that disagreements could be resolved with conversation rather than violence. She learned that love wasn't about control but about support, about wanting the other person to grow and thrive. Teresa started teaching in January of 1879, and she loved it immediately. The children ranged from 6 to 14, and they were hungry for knowledge and eager to learn. Teresa taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, but also geography and history and science. She encouraged questions and curiosity, and the schoolhouse became a place of discovery and joy. Ethan was proud of her in a way that made Teresa's heart full. He bragged to anyone who would listen about his wife, the teacher, and he never once complained about the time she spent preparing lessons or the energy she poured into her students. Instead, he supported her completely, even building her a desk in their bedroom so she'd have a quiet place to work. Spring came again to Colorado, and with it came new life. The cattle had calves, the chickens had chicks, and Teresa realized she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, afraid of what motherhood would mean, afraid of passing on her pain to a child. But Ethan held her and reminded her that she would be an extraordinary mother because she knew what children needed, had experienced firsthand what they didn't. "You'll be wonderful," he told her, his hand on her still flat stomach. "And I'll be right here beside you every step of the way." Their son was born in October, a healthy baby boy with Ethan's gray eyes and Teresa's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Ethan's father, with the hope that this Thomas would carry only the good parts of that legacy forward. Teresa had never felt love like what she felt holding her son, and she understood in that moment that she was capable of so much more than she'd believed. She could love fiercely and protect completely and nurture generously, because that's what she'd wanted for herself and never received, and she would make damn sure her child never knew that kind of lack. Ethan was a devoted father, waking for midnight feedings and changing diapers without complaint and rocking Thomas to sleep while singing off-key lullabies. Watching him with their son made Teresa fall in love with him all over again, deeper and more completely than she'd thought possible. The years rolled forward, each one better than the last. Teresa continued teaching, taking breaks when their children were born. After Thomas came Margaret in 1881, and then Joseph in 1883, and their home filled with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of family life. The ranch prospered under Ethan's careful management, and they expanded the herd and added horses, just as Ethan had planned. Teresa's confidence grew with each passing year. The scared woman who'd arrived in Loveland in 1878 was still part of her, but she was no longer defined by that fear. She was Teresa Sharpe, teacher and mother and wife, a woman who knew her own worth because someone had loved her enough to remind her of it every single day. Ethan never stopped his campaign of daily kindness. He brought her coffee in bed and wildflowers from the pasture. He kissed her goodbye in the morning and hello in the evening. He told her she was beautiful and brilliant and the best thing in his life. He supported her dreams and celebrated her successes, and held her through her occasional dark moments when the past tried to claw its way back. On their 10th wedding anniversary in December of 1888, Teresa and Ethan sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains while their children played in the yard. Thomas was 9 now, serious and thoughtful like his father. Margaret was 7, bright and curious and already showing signs she'd follow her mother into teaching. Joseph was 5, wild and joyful and convinced he could befriend every animal on the ranch. "You remember the first time I came into the store?" Ethan asked, his arm around Teresa's shoulders. "I remember thinking you were too tall and wondering what you wanted from me." "I wanted to buy flour," Ethan laughed. "But then I saw you and I wanted so much more than that. I wanted to know you, to understand what had put that look in your eyes. I wanted to fix it. You did fix it." Not all at once, but slowly, day by day. Teresa leaned her head against his shoulder. "You reminded me what kindness felt like when I'd forgotten. You showed me what love was supposed to be. You gave me a life I never thought I could have. We gave each other a life. You reminded me that patience and gentleness matter. You taught me what real strength looks like. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving." Ethan kissed her temple. "I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I'll love you even more tomorrow." "How is that possible?" "Because love isn't finite. It grows when you nurture it, and we've spent 10 years nurturing what we have. We'll spend 50 more doing the same, God willing." They got those 50 years and more. Ethan and Teresa Sharpe became fixtures in Loveland, the ranch couple who'd found each other against the odds and built something beautiful together. Teresa taught 2 generations of children, shaping young minds and instilling in them the love of learning she'd discovered herself. Ethan expanded the ranch until it was one of the most successful in Colorado, but he never lost the gentle kindness that had first attracted Teresa to him. Their children grew up knowing they were loved unconditionally, and they carried that knowledge forward into their own lives. Thomas became a veterinarian, using his skill with animals to help the community. Margaret became a teacher like her mother, opening a school for girls in Denver. Joseph stayed on the ranch, inheriting it eventually and running it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. As Teresa and Ethan grew older together, they never lost the magic of those early days. Ethan still brought her coffee in the morning and kissed her every night before bed. Teresa still looked at him with wonder sometimes, amazed that this man was hers, that this life was real. They rocked together on the porch in the evenings, watching their grandchildren play where their children once had, and counted themselves blessed. When Ethan died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Teresa mourned him deeply, but without bitterness. They'd had 52 years together, every single one of them a gift. He'd kept his promise, reminding her every day what kindness felt like, what love felt like, until she believed it in her bones. Teresa lived another 5 years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the love she and Ethan had built. On her final day, lying in the bedroom she'd shared with Ethan for over half a century, she looked at the carved wooden bird still sitting on her windowsill, the first gift he'd given her all those years ago. "I remember," she whispered to the empty room, to Ethan's spirit, to the life they'd built together. "I remember what kindness feels like. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for every single day." Her children found her that way, peaceful and smiling, the wooden bird clutched in her hand. They buried her next to Ethan on the hill overlooking the ranch, with a headstone that read, "Teresa Sharpe, beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend." She learned to believe in kindness again. And in the town of Loveland, Colorado, people still told the story of the cowboy who'd wooed a broken woman with patience and gentleness, who'd reminded her every single day what kindness felt like, until she remembered how to live again. They told it as a love story, which it was, but also as a testament to the power of persistent compassion, of choosing to be kind even when kindness isn't expected or immediately returned. The Sharpe Ranch continued for generations, and every person who inherited it learned the story of Ethan and Teresa, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Love, they were taught, isn't just a feeling. It's a daily choice, a commitment to show up and be kind and remind the people you care about that they matter. It's patient and persistent, and it can heal wounds that seem too deep to mend. Years after Teresa's death, when the town erected a memorial to its founders and most influential citizens, they included a plaque for Ethan and Teresa Sharpe. It didn't mention the ranch or Teresa's teaching or any of their tangible accomplishments. Instead, it reads simply, "He reminded her what kindness felt like. She taught him what healing looked like. Together, they showed us all what love looks like." And every year on their wedding anniversary in December, the citizens of Loveland would gather at the memorial and share stories of kindness, of times when someone's persistent compassion had made a difference in their lives. It became a tradition, one that lasted well beyond anyone who'd actually known Ethan and Teresa, a tradition that kept their legacy alive long after they were gone. Because that's what real love does. It ripples outward, touching lives beyond the two people at its center. It creates a legacy of kindness that outlasts individual lifetimes. It reminds people, generation after generation, that compassion matters, that gentleness has power, that choosing to be kind every single day without fail can literally change the world, one person at a time. Teresa Brennan had arrived in Loveland broken and afraid, a woman who'd forgotten what kindness felt like. Ethan Sharpe had seen her pain and made it his mission to remind her, every day, that she was worthy of love and gentleness and care. And in doing so, he hadn't just saved one woman. He'd created a love story that would inspire countless others to choose kindness, to persist in compassion, to believe that even the deepest wounds can heal with enough patience and care. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the ranch, still tended the cattle in the shadow of the mountains, still woke up to Colorado sunrises and went to bed under Colorado stars. And they knew the story of Ethan and Teresa, the love that had started it all, the reminder that kindness is never wasted, that gentleness is never weakness, and that love, real love, is the persistent choice to show up for someone every single day, no matter what. In the house on the ranch, in a place of honor on the mantel, sat a carved wooden bird, worn smooth by more than a century of careful handling. It had been passed down through the generations, along with the story of the scared woman and the patient cowboy who'd given it to her as a promise. "I will remind you what kindness feels like," and he had. Every single day without fail, until the day he died and beyond, because love like that doesn't end with death. It lives on in children and grandchildren, in stories told and retold, in the legacy of choosing compassion over cruelty, patience over pressure, kindness over everything else. That was the real story of Ethan and Teresa Sharpe. Not just a love story, though it was that. Not just a tale of healing, though it was that too. But a reminder, echoing across more than a century, that one person's committed kindness can change another person's entire world. That showing up every day matters. That gentleness has its own strength. That love, real love, is both a feeling and a choice, both a gift and a daily practice. And in Loveland, Colorado, where the Rocky Mountains paint the horizon purple and gold, where the wind carries the scent of prairie grass and possibility, the legacy of that love continued. It continued in the students Teresa had taught who went on to teach others. It continued in the ranch Ethan had built that still supported families and livelihoods. It continued in the tradition of kindness that the town maintained, in the way people looked out for each other, helped each other, reminded each other that compassion mattered. Most of all, it continued in the countless individual moments when someone chose to be kind. When a man held a door for a woman who flinched from unexpected gestures. When a woman smiled at a stranger who looked like they needed it. When people showed up day after day, for those they loved, reminding them through actions large and small that they mattered, that they were seen, that they were worthy of care. Teresa had forgotten what kindness felt like, back in that spring of 1878 when she'd stepped off the stagecoach carrying all her fear and pain. But Ethan had reminded her, every single day without fail, through coffee and carved birds, through wildflowers and gentle words, through patience and persistence, and the unwavering belief that she deserved better than what she'd known. And because he'd reminded her, Teresa had been able to remind others. Her children, her students, everyone whose life she'd touched. The ripples spread outward, touching more lives than either Ethan or Teresa could have imagined when they'd first clasped hands in that northern pasture overlooking the mountains. That was their true legacy. Not the ranch, not the school, not even their children, as beloved as they all were. Their legacy was the reminder that kindness matters, that one person's committed compassion can heal wounds that seem impossible to heal. That love is the daily choice to show up and care and remind someone that they matter. And so the story ended, but not really, because stories like this don't truly end. They continue in every act of kindness, in every moment of compassion, in every person who chooses to remind someone else what love feels like. They continue in the persistent, daily choice to be gentle with the broken places in others, to show up even when it's hard, to believe that kindness is never wasted. Teresa and Ethan Sharpe had shown an entire town, an entire territory, what was possible when someone refused to give up on kindness. And though they were long gone, buried side by side on that hill overlooking the ranch, their story lived on. It lived on in the carved bird on the mantel, in the memorial in town, in the tradition of telling stories of kindness on their anniversary, in every moment when someone chose compassion over cruelty. She had forgotten what kindness felt like. He had reminded her every day without fail. And together, they had built a love that lasted not just a lifetime but generations. A love that proved beyond doubt that one person's persistent gentleness could change the world, one heart at a time.